Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come, 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 whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover you are. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Broken your vows and vows in times, though you've broken your vows and lovers in time. Ours is your vows and lovers in times. Ours is your vows and vows in time. Broken your vows and vows in times. Come yet again, come.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to People's Church. Whether this is your first time at People's Church or you come every Sunday or anywhere in between, I welcome you. My name is Laura McClellan, and I'm from the Sunday Services Committee at People's Church. People's Church is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association and part of a tradition of liberal religion. Here, our mission is to be a beloved community, embracing and serving our diverse world. This morning, we are joined by Dr. Randy Partain, who is a fellowshipped minister with the Unitarian Universalist Association, serving Tapestry Unitarian Universalist Church in Houston, Texas. His primary focus during this pandemic year has been deepening community connection through nurturing spiritual development and vibrant small group ministry. He passionately defines ministry as inviting people into a deeper relationship with themselves, deeper connection with others, and deeper awareness of the world we all share. Welcome, all.
Thank you, Laura. Edwin Markham's poem, Outwitted, relates, "He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in." It's wonderful to be with you virtually on this spring morning, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to join you across the miles. Thank you for welcoming me today as we consider how we might intentionally draw our circle of welcome and acceptance wider. Our introit today is "There's a River Flowing in My Soul."
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me
Thank you, Savannah. As we light our communal flame this morning, I invite you to light a chalice or candle at home if you would like, and please type into the chat window. A chalice is lit in your neighborhood, your street, your city, whatever you would like, and just let us see how far that light spreads. We create sacred space together with words from Betsy Dar. May the light of this chalice give light and warmth to our community when we are joyful and when we are in despair. And may we feel the warmth spread from our circle to wider and wider circles until all know they belong to the one circle of life.
Today at 12:30, Donna McClurkin will be speaking about gardening at the Green Sanctuary Committee Eco Forum. She says it will be heavily philosophical, somewhat unconventional, and only a little technical. The Zoom link was included in the This Week at People's Church message.
Good morning. It's Alan Hunt again, back to give you your report. And I'll confess, first of all, that we expected or hoped would be a much better word, that this might be the final Sunday. Stewardship committees always over project and end up disappointed, but here's the good news. We have 87 pledges in hand as of this morning for $208,000. Which is about 73% of our goal. The difficulty is that we have about 85 pledges that are still missing. As you can imagine, that means we have the better half of the pledges in hand and the other half still out there somewhere. So our average pledge is 10% over where we finished last year, which is outstanding. And we thank you for those very generous pledges. And now we have to go find the rest of the people who haven't transitioned to the Zoom forum and don't know where they are exactly. We will, however, send another reminder, both electronic and paper, depending on the situation, tomorrow to that 85 missing people, and regard this all as another cost of the pandemic. It makes it very hard to grow the beloved community when we can't join in as a community. Zoom is great, but it's not a substitute for face-to-face contact. So thank you for hanging in with us, and we will do our best to contact the other half. And if you haven't seen your name on the scrolling honor roll, we're usually a couple days late with the honor roll compared to what I know, which is as of this morning. But let me also say, don't be afraid to mention this to any of your close friends that you somehow happen to cross paths with. Don't be afraid to ask them if they've made their pledge. We need to get to 100% or close, and we'll be working on that this next week. Let me conclude by introducing our last testimonial. It is from church member Donna McClurkin, you have just heard about, who's also doing the Echo Forum after church today. So please welcome Donna and listen to her message. Thank you.
Hey, people's people. This is Donna McClurkin here with an 11th hour appeal for all the stragglers out there who haven't yet pledged. But first, a confession. I haven't done my pledge yet either. Yikes, it kind of snuck up on me. Maybe that's what happened to you too. Anyway, I've been thinking a lot about what to share with you today, and it was hard to pick just one thing because there's so much I love about People's Church. Here's where I landed. When I joined the church back in the fall of 2017, I was kind of a hot mess. That's mostly ancient history now. But in thinking about the things I needed most from the church back then, I keep coming back to the rituals we have. They matter so much, I think, because even in the best of times, they're predictable, consistent, symbolic, and they pass the test of time. Said another way, they're durable and enduring. Constants in a world in flux and rife with things we can't control. In particular, I love the rituals we have around water, the joys and sorrows, the water service, and the symbolic lighting of the chalice. I love the structure of the chalice circle I belong to and the ways in which we occasionally tweak that when we need to, and then come back to it. Even before I joined the church, my daughter and I would attend Christmas Eve service, alternating with the Portage UU Church. We loved that so much. And last Christmas Eve, the way that folks pulled together something that must have been technically very challenging blew my mind. Especially the part where we passed the candle to each other separately, together, on Zoom. It felt like a prayer. I can't wait to experience that ritual in person with you whenever it's safe to do so. So I'm going to close with a very public commitment to get my pledge in by Tuesday of this coming week. Please consider doing so too, if you are able. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that we have learned is that Zoom is not as good as being in person, and yet there are some advantages to worshiping over Zoom. For instance, you can have a snack during the service and nobody will fuss at you for bringing food into the sanctuary. And so I was going to have a snack this morning and I just wanted a normal apple, but I'm having a hard time because I'm not really sure what a normal apple is anymore. Maybe you've had this problem too. Maybe this isn't a normal problem, but you know, this apple is red. It's a nice red apple. It's a little small and it's kind of lopsided. I'm not sure if it's normal for an apple to tilt like that, but this apple is really yellow. I don't know if apples are supposed to be that yellow. Is that normal for an apple? And then I had this one. This one's a pretty good sized apple, but it's kind of bruised up. I don't know if you can see how bruised this apple is. Is it normal for an apple to be that bruised? And I was puzzling over how to tell which of these apples is a normal apple. And then I remembered something that someone taught me, that if you cut an apple open, and of course, if you're going to cut an apple open at home, get an adult's help because we don't want to play with knives at home. Well, when I cut an apple open, there's a star on the inside. And that's every apple. It doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. It doesn't matter what color the skin is. It doesn't matter how bruised up it is. It doesn't matter what size it is. Every apple, when I cut it open, it's going to have a star on the inside. That's what's normal for an apple. So when Unitarian Universalists talk about every person having inherent worth and dignity, that's what we're talking about. It's like everyone has a star on the inside. And it doesn't matter what color someone's skin is. It doesn't matter if they look a little bruised up by life. It doesn't matter what size they are. Every person is worthy of love and acceptance, just like every apple has a star on the inside. Even you. So I hope you remember that today as we talk about drawing our circle of acceptance wider, that every person is worthy of love and acceptance. And that includes all of us. Thank you.
The words for this morning's offering come from John Saxon. This religious community exists by its mission as a fire exists by burning. But a fire cannot burn without fuel. And it is the time, the energy, the imagination, the vision, the creativity, the compassion, the love, and the financial support of the members and friends of this community that fuels our mission to nurture and sustain a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse liberal religious community that transforms lives and serves the world. Your support, the free and generous support of each and every member and friend of this community, is what fuels this community and its mission. And without your support, the flame of justice, community, and love cannot burn brightly to warm ourselves and be a beacon in a world threatened by division and fear. The offering will now be received. Please join me in giving thanks for all that sustains us. You can find the words in the chat box. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love, which none of us can accomplish alone. Each Sunday, we take a moment to share with one another the joys and sorrows, concerns and milestones in our lives. If you would like to share, please type your message into the chat box and I will put a stone in a bowl of water for you. If you would prefer not to share the details and simply would like a stone, you may type the word stone into the chat box and I will put one in the bowl for you. I'm going to pause the recording so that you have some measure of privacy.
In his book, A Wild Sheep Chase, Haruki Murakami wrote, "Mountains, according to the angle of view, the season, the time of day, the beholder's frame of mind, or any one thing, can effectively change their appearance. Thus, it is essential to recognize that we can never know more than one side, one small aspect of a mountain." It's a short passage, so I'll read it one more time. "Mountains, according to the angle of view, the season, the time of day, the beholder's frame of mind, or any one thing, can effectively change their appearance. Thus, it is essential to recognize that we can never know more than one side, one small aspect of a mountain." I invite you to sing along with our congregational song, "We Are Not Our Own."
Give to earth and all things living liturgies of care. Let us be a house of welcome, living stone upholding living stone, gladly showing all our neighbors we are not our own.
Thank you, Savannah. And thank you, Karen, for mentioning in chat that if you want to try finding the star in your apple at home, make sure to cut it horizontally. If you cut it vertically, you probably won't see the star. So thank you, Karen, for helping folks find their own stars at home. Some people, especially in Unitarian Universalist churches, pride themselves on being unusual. Some of us go out of our way not to seem normal. You may have heard that normal is just a setting on the washing machine. And yet, we still seem to wrestle with understanding other people's perspectives sometimes. We still tend to draw circles that include some and exclude others. We've also heard a lot over the past year about adjusting to a new normal. We were told that we have to adjust to a new normal in the way that we think about the health and well-being of our families and neighborhoods. We had to adjust to a new normal about how we gather together and build community. Some people are still very resistant to this sort of adjustment. Just the practice of wearing masks was met with so much resistance in so many places in our country. People believe that their individual rights are infringed upon because they don't want to wear a mask. It doesn't feel normal. It's interesting that in Japan, Thailand, Taiwan, mask wearing wasn't a tough sell. It was already normal. People were already used to the practice. It was already seen as considerate, culturally acceptable, maybe even culturally reinforced. So wearing a mask in and of itself isn't normal or abnormal. It's just a function of our experience, what we are used to. We think that when we call something normal, we're talking in the abstract. We think we can talk objectively about normal human behavior, normal human relationships, normal practices or beliefs. But what we call normal is almost always a function of what we're personally used to, what we have experienced in our own lives, as limited as that scope may be. So before we get used to a new normal, we may need to gain a new understanding of what normal really means. Who decides what normal even is? And it's an important question, not just because we might see a mountain differently than someone looking at it from another angle or a different season or time of day. If we want to welcome people into our communities of faith and encourage them to grow spiritually, we first have to let them know that where they are in this moment is acceptable, normal. I remember reading surveys collected after a workshop that I co-led, and it had some typical demographic questions to ensure that we were presenting the material to a wide variety of people. And one individual responded to a question about racial or ethnic identity by self-identifying as normal human pinkish, which I think indicated some shame or embarrassment about being white and having privilege, but I'm not sure. Whatever their skin tone happened to be, they thought of it as normal. Of course, that means that people who don't have pinkish skin are not normal. That is problematic. Whether it's about the shade of our skin, our gender identity, our political ideologies, our theologies, or anything else, our commitment to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person means that we might need to develop a deeper awareness about how we draw a circle around ourselves and say, I'm normal, the way I think and feel and believe is normal, and everyone else is, well, not normal, that can cause a lot of harm. We might inadvertently contribute to marginalizing someone by our words or our actions based on nothing more than our narrow definition of what's normal. Those little injuries are the opposite of fostering justice, equity, and compassion. I was on a social media site recently, and I saw a post from a father who wrote, "The teenager I have always thought of as my son came out to me as transgender today. I'm so proud of her for being so brave, and I can't wait to take her shopping for clothes that let her be herself." Heartwarming, right? And yet so many responses to this post were filled with animosity. There were a lot of affirming responses, but one reply said, "Why can't you keep your family's disgusting behavior private instead of forcing the rest of us to be exposed to it?" One read, "Way to go, Dad. Being proud of your degenerate child is a special kind of depravity." Another said, "Pretending it's okay doesn't make it normal." It's easy to feel angry at those strangers. And yet we all have a tendency to make the same mistake in one way or another. We assume that our experience is more or less the same as everyone else's. We have a hard time understanding how another human being could believe or feel something radically different from us. And if they do, they seem abnormal, worthy of judgment or ridicule or hostility. It may not occur to us that for a transgender girl in transition, wearing feminine clothing is normal. It isn't aberrant. It isn't disgusting. It's normal. For a young Black man to be afraid of the police may not seem normal to some people. Someone may think that anyone who's afraid of the police must have something to hide. They must be a criminal. And yet it's very normal in many Black communities to distrust the police, and there are understandable reasons for that. We grow up in communities, and those communities define our first understanding of what normal is. If a person grows up in a Black community, how they see police is defined by generations of cultural experience. It's normalized by the experiences of a lot of other people in that community. And if a person grows up in a predominantly white community, normal relationships with police might look different. We have a hard time understanding the experiences of others when everyone around us we were growing up around seemed to have similar expectations. And we get taught a lot of things growing up. Our definition of normal is molded by the lessons of our upbringing. Things like big boys don't cry. Big girls don't cry either, for that matter. Just don't cry. Crying is bad. It isn't acceptable to cry in front of other people unless something's wrong with you, and then you should apologize for crying. That's what normal people do. It might take some work to sort through all of the lessons that we are taught growing up. What have we accepted as normal just because it's what we saw around us, just because we didn't see anyone doing something different? Or what have we felt shame about or some resentment about because what we experience is in conflict with those messages about what normal means? We see other people seeming to enjoy their lives in their typical nuclear families with their typical careers and relationships, and we think, why can't I have that? Why can't I be normal? Why can't my family be normal? Maybe it's in communities of trust that we learn to accept the nuances of our experience and start to heal some of the wounds of our past rather than hiding them. Once we see that everyone has wounds that need healing, we can start honestly sharing our legitimate needs if we're in a community of people who make it normal to vulnerably share what we need. Or maybe we step up to meet needs more confidently when we're in a community that makes it normal to engage our passions in a meaningful way. If we want to engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, Our congregations need to be places where folks know that whatever they're going through, wherever they are in their personal search, they are acceptable. In so many churches, the normal behavior is for folks to take up a line in the membership book, donate their pledge, and sit back and wait to be ministered to. And don't get me wrong, we all need to be cared for. We all need to be ministered to. It's important for us to create space for that. It's also important for us to recognize that this community isn't just for us. We can take responsibility for building beloved community together with a common vision. We can nurture one another through what we create together. And that's how we discover meaningful spiritual community, by actively engaging in the work of building it. That nurtures us spiritually too. And it isn't always a bad thing to be unusual. I've gotten attention before because a group of people learned that I'm a composer and a pianist, and they want to know all about that. That's fascinating to them. They don't feel like creative people, so my skill set is unusual. It isn't normal. I become the focus of their attention, and that can be nice. But there's more to me than that. If that's all someone wants to know about me, it can start to feel like I'm not being seen completely. I'm a novelty. I've seen some liberal groups treat people from marginalized communities in a similar way. Their identity is outside the norm for the group, so they become a point of fascination and oddity. They aren't welcomed as full human beings because everyone is so focused on the one quality that makes them intriguing, their skin color or their gender identity or sexuality or whatever. That can feel a little icky. Strange to say it, but being valued for being outside the norm can be as problematic as being excluded for being outside the norm. Drawing the circle wider means inviting complete whole human beings into deeper relationship, allowing all of who someone is to be normal, acceptable, celebrated, even those aspects of who they are that are very different from our personal experience. Recently, I watched a documentary about transgender representations in movies and television, and I was struck by an offhanded comment made by one of the people interviewed. He said, "At the time, I was in and out of shelters, couch surfing, the typical Black trans experience in New York City. The normal experience of a transgender person of color in New York City when this person was growing up was to be in and out of shelters and couch surfing. Does that seem normal to you? Or do you have to draw the circle of normal wider in order to include this individual's experience in your understanding of human reality?" Now, I don't mean to say that any experience should be normal. We're not talking about a vision for the world right now. We're talking about the real lived experience of human beings. Some people experience something very different than what we might wish for them, but that's their experience. In many cases, that's what was normal to them, or it became normal for them. There are some things we don't want to normalize. We don't want injustice to become normal. It has in many ways. We've seen that we can engage in the democratic process to begin changing that, to actively create a new normal for our society. We want to put our financial and physical resources toward effecting change so that some people experience a normal that can be improved. We don't want it to be normal that people don't have clean water to drink. We don't want it to be normal that people live in toxic environments because they can't afford to live anywhere else. We don't want it to be normal that people are afraid of police. We don't want a lot of things to be normal. But we have to accept that those experiences are normal for some people before we can really understand the need for change. Some people have a lot easier time seeing their experience validated by the world around them. Cisgender, straight, white people see what they think of as normal experience represented on television and in movies all the time. But for people in marginalized communities, it has historically been much more of a challenge to see your experience validated in mainstream media. How were Black men represented in the media you saw when you were growing up? Because that may have influenced what you subconsciously decided was normal for Black culture and reality. How do you see lesbians represented in media? How do you see Muslim people represented? How do you see transgender people represented? A lot of people live in silos. We have friends who look more or less like us. We have friends with the same general financial resources as us, the same educational background as us, similar political ideologies. And so that becomes our definition of normal. And for people outside of that definition of normal, we often rely on problematic portrayals in media and assume what we're seeing is an accurate representation of people who aren't normal, not our kind of normal. So Edwin Markham's poem is significant here. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in. We don't need to feel shame about how we draw our circle of normal, but maybe we can be more aware of how we define normal. Maybe intentionally drawing the circle wider, drawing our definition of normal wider, can help us be more welcoming toward the people that we really want to build thriving, beloved community with. Maybe it can even help us be more deeply connected with one another, because we might judge the people we see right in front of us this morning a little harshly sometimes if they do something that falls outside our definition of normal. If someone says, I want to share an idea and I'd like to finish my thought without anyone interrupting me, we may not be used to that. We may think, that's weird. Who says that? What's wrong with them? We might try to pick apart why this person would state that odd boundary. Maybe we start telling stories in our heads about why someone would behave so abnormally. But for that person, maybe this behavior is normal. Maybe they've been frustrated by a lot of people's dismissive behavior in the past when they wanted to share an important idea, and they've learned to allow this intentional statement of expectation to set a healthy framework for respectful communication. Or maybe it doesn't feel normal to them yet because it's new. We don't have to know any of that in order to draw our definition of normal a little wider. We can be curious. We can care about how other people are doing without deciding that their behavior isn't acceptable. Because normal is this arbitrary thing. It's partly the messages that we get from the world around us. This way of being is normal, and anything outside of that is dangerous or worthy of ridicule. And it's partly just our experience. What we've experienced seems normal to us. That's our point of reference for how life is supposed to be. But if we want to build authentic, meaningful community that embraces multiculturalism and seeks to genuinely welcome people who have been rejected, misrepresented, and marginalized, we need a definition of normal that includes them. Because what we say when we define normal more broadly is that a person makes sense. If you're not normal, if I can't make room in my circle for your experience or behavior or identity, then I'm essentially saying, you don't make sense to me. You don't belong. You aren't welcome. When I can look at you and say, I haven't experienced what you've experienced. I don't have the same identity that you have, but I'm willing for your life to make sense to me. I'm willing to learn who you are rather than tell you who you ought to be. Now I'm communicating that you matter. You're worthy. You are welcome. And it begins with a willingness to listen. Welcoming other people's experiences, beliefs, or identities doesn't require us to change our own. Drawing the circle wider doesn't require us to change what we've experienced or who we are. We're still in that circle. We still get to be completely ourselves. We just allow space for other people to be connected with us without feeling like they don't belong. I get to be me, and you get to be you, and all of us are normal. When we can create this depth of connection, this radical inclusion, we start to see the power of a resilient community of people who have different ways of seeing the world. We start to see the way growth happens when people feel safe being vulnerable because they don't have to pretend to be a certain way just to have a place of belonging. We start to see how adapting to change outside of ourselves becomes easier because we have a community of trusted travelers on the journey with us. So may we listen and read other people's perspectives with that vision in mind. May we bear witness mindfully to other people's stories, not judging their experiences or identities as normal or abnormal, but just allowing people to be who they are and drawing our circle of understanding to encompass their life, their experience, their normal. And may we draw the circle wider together and wider still, and eventually learn that we don't need to draw a circle to acknowledge the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the legitimacy of every person's experience and identity. Maybe we can just say, may love become our new normal. As we take a moment for reflection, I invite you to close your eyes if you like, and just consider for a moment, who is it for you? Who are you drawing a circle and shutting out? Maybe it's not a specific individual. Maybe it's a group of people. Maybe a group of people you don't even know personally. Who is it for you? And what would it take for you to draw a circle that includes them? What would it take for you to recognize their experience, their identity as normal, valid, human? How can we be even better at welcoming and celebrating others as complete, whole human beings? If you're willing, you can begin that work this week, today, if you want. You can begin that work of drawing your circle of normal wider. May you be so bold. Amen, and blessed be. Our closing song today is Make Channels for the Streams of Love. I invite you to sing along.
Make channels for the streams of love where they may broadly run, and
As we extinguish our chalice today, may you go forth with eyes of compassion and ears of understanding, nurturing greater wholeness in the world around you by intentionally drawing your circle of acceptance wider. Go with peace and courage.